The bird lands on the fence first, not the feeder. The feeder is only 3 feet away, full of seed, completely still. Yet the bird remains where it is. Its body leans forward slightly. 1 foot shifts. The head tilts once toward the feeder, then once toward the house. A few seconds pass. Then something almost invisible happens. A tiny adjustment of posture, barely more than a fraction of an inch. Only after that does the bird fly down to eat. You've watched this so many times it became background. One of those things the yard does that you stopped truly seeing. Most people assume that moment is hesitation. They think the bird is simply deciding whether it feels brave enough to approach the food. That assumption is wrong. Not partially wrong, completely wrong. What you're actually watching is the final stage of a survival calculation that may have been running for days, weeks, or even months. Before a bird fully trusts a feeder, it first has to decide whether it trusts you. And the tiny movement that comes right before landing is often the visible result of that decision. Welcome back to Wild Bird Whispering. If you're new here, subscribe before you leave because this channel is built for people who want to understand what the birds in their yard are actually doing, not what we assume they're doing. And later in this video, you're going to see why a bird's first act of trust may begin long before it ever touches the feeder. The birds in your yard are not passive. They are running survival math constantly. Research from institutions including the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and studies published in journals such as Behavioral Ecology have shown the birds continuously evaluate risk, predictability, and environmental change. Every approach to a feeder passes through a threat assessment system. Every movement you make becomes data. That tiny posture shift matters more than you think. In many species, including chickadees, sparrows, and titmice, feeding is one of the most vulnerable activities they perform. Their attention narrows, reaction time decreases, escape routes become critical. A predator can cover several meters in less than a second. A bird that miscalculates risk may not get a second chance. So before trust comes feeding, and before feeding comes reclassification. You may think the bird is studying the feeder. Often it's studying you. The warning network operating across your yard has already recorded dozens of encounters. Your walking speed, your voice, whether you stare directly at birds, how suddenly you open doors, even the times of day you appear. Predictability equals safety. Unpredictability equals risk. We'll come back to that. The strangest part is that trust rarely begins with the bird at the feeder. It often begins with the first bird willing to test the environment. Field studies on social learning show that birds use public information. They watch other birds survive. One individual lands. Nothing bad happens. Another follows. Then another. The contract expands through observation. The first bird matters more than you think because it becomes evidence for everyone else. And this is usually the moment people realize they've been misunderstanding their own yard for years. Because once you see this pattern, you start noticing it everywhere. But the part most people never notice is what happens after the obvious danger checks stock. And that's where the real survival decision is happening. The tiny movement right before landing is often a commitment signal. Not a signal to you, a signal to itself. The bird's body orientation changes. Muscle tension decreases slightly. The escape-ready posture softens. Corticosterone, the hormone associated with stress responses, begins to fall. The threat assessment system has not declared the environment safe. Wild animals rarely do that. It has simply decided the risk is acceptable. And this is where everything changes. Because the bird is not trusting the feeder, it is trusting a pattern. The feeder cannot earn trust. You can. Every calm appearance, every predictable movement, every day you behave the same way contributes to a long process of reclassification. You move from potential threat to known quantity to tolerated presence to part of the landscape. If you've ever had the feeling that a bird was watching you longer than it should have, or reacting differently to you than to everyone else in your house, stay with me here. Because the research behind that behavior changes the entire way you think about trust in wild animals. The next time a bird pauses on the fence before visiting your feeder, watch carefully. Look for the foot adjustment, the slight lean, the subtle release of tension. That moment is not random. It is the visible edge of an ancient survival system, making one final calculation. In a modern backyard filled with fences, windows, and bird feeders, the same evolutionary machinery that once judged hawks, snakes, and mammals is now judging you. And when that bird finally drops onto the feeder, it isn't showing confidence. It's revealing the outcome of a decision built from memory, prediction, public information, and survival math. The yard has been speaking this language the entire time. You were part of the conversation long before you realized it. What bird in your yard seems to perform that final safety check more consistently than any other before approaching a feeder? I read everyone. I'll see you in the next one.